Hey, what's up, everybody? He's IC Indian Cowboy. I'm Scott Spreitzer. We are DocSports.com, and we are looking to go against the spread, both sides and totals this week in college and pro football, the playoffs in college. And then there were four. We'll get to those in just a minute. And of course, wild card action in the NFL. My favorite playoff weekend by far is the wild card round. Before we get to all of that, our plays will be up and available 6 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday, 3 p.m. Pacific, for the entire weekend, both college and pro football for both IC and I and everybody else over at DocSports.com. And if you've not yet become a member, listen, there's a real cool way to give it a trial run at Docs. You click on the link below the video, you can get yourself set up for a free $60 account, and then you can use those free $60 on any of our daily packages. As simple as that. All right, we head into Thursday night college football. We kick off the playoffs. Notre Dame laying 1 against Penn State. The total sitting at 45. And it's kind of funny. I looked at that game against Georgia. I didn't actually play that game, but a lot of people talking about the way Notre Dame handled Georgia and had no problem. And I was like, really, it came down to the final minute of the first half and the opening kickoff of the second half. Georgia scored 17 points over about, 2 minutes of game time, less than 2 minutes of game time. And we'll give Notre Dame's defense a lot of credit for holding Georgia's offense down. But again, they're not going to be able to count on pure luck. And that's kind of what that was against Georgia. And again, I had no bone to pick with either team. I'm just calling it like I happen to see it. But in this particular game, is James Franklin going to be able to finally win a big game against a top 5 opponent? Or do you think his team goes home and the Irish advance to the championship?
It's just so crazy, man, that to see Penn State 1 game away from a national championship.
Yep.
Like, I didn't think Penn State was that good. But, of course, it would be – I was waiting for the show to come on, and I saw one of Barstool Sports, Barstool Sports saying that the SEC is dead and they're a middle-of-the-road conference at best.
Okay.
And, of course, all the SEC fans jumped in. Dave Portnoy says that just to get everybody riled up.
Of course.
Are you kidding me, dude? Like, we've won like 13 or 15 national titles since 2003 or 5. Like, don't be silly. One bad year. But it has this vibe of like this Big Ten championship. Looks like the Big Ten is going to get what they want. Like, remember Alabama versus LSU for the title?
Sure.
So it has this vibe that it could end up Penn State versus Ohio State, doesn't it? Just a big crowning moment. And, of course, who's the commissioner? The Big Ten commissioner, right? So that kind of has that vibe to it. I definitely don't have a lean on the side in this game, but if I had to go with coaching style alone, I would go James Franklin for sure. He's the better coach. Okay, there's no doubt about that. But I do like the under probably more. I think that Notre Dame is sketchy when it comes to offense. When they play really good defenses, scoring 23 against Georgia, and they got lucky there. They they put up 27 against Indiana, even 31 against Georgia Tech. And Penn State, obviously, they're going to suck the life out of you if they get up on this game, like they sucked the life out of Boise State and SMU. So I really like the under in this game. And if I had to pick a side, it would actually be Penn State.
Yeah, I like the under too. I mean, Notre Dame didn't pile up a bunch of yards against Georgia, that's for sure. They got 14, I don't want to say gift points, they earned them, but you know what I mean, on the special teams. And then, of course, that late fumble in the first half. And again, they did move up and down the field. Also, if you look at what Riley Leonard does, he doesn't throw turnover-worthy passes. He had 90 yards. That was it on 24 passes last week. He's throwing a lot of dink and dunk stuff. And then if you're Penn State, you're not going to put the ball in the air too much because Allard does have that tendency to throw a pick. 1 in every 21 passes is what he did this year. I think both teams established the run the football. Clock keeps moving. I agree with you on the under. The Friday game is, of course, the Buckeyes laying 5.5, 6, total 53.5 against Texas. The game at AT&T Stadium in Dallas, kind of a home game here for Texas, but obviously Buckeye fans will turn out, no doubt about it. I got to say about this game, first of all, when the line came out, it opened 4.5, and a couple of lower limit books that wanted to get out in front of things. And we saw the line immediately go to like 6. And I knew early on it wasn't going to be a situation where if you put out a 4, you're not going to get Texas money when that line opened. It was fresh off of Ohio State's incredible win over the Oregon Ducks. And so I thought that was too low when it opened. Because of when it opened, it got to 6, got down to 5, a lot of 5.5, some 6s out there now as we speak on Wednesday evening. As far as I'm concerned, my one caveat on this one I don't like the way Texas has been playing in the second half of football games. The last 8 weeks, they're 0-6-2 straight up if you just look at the second half. And, they've been outscored on average like 13-9 averaging 9 points per game in their last 8 second halves. That worries me a little bit. And I'm trying to look for good reasons to grab those points. That one does scare me a little bit. Your thoughts?
I like Texas, and I think that finally they get to be the hunter. They don't get to be the hunted, right? They're not being hunted this time around, and that because they've been. I don't know if they've been a dog all year long, and now they get to be the underdog. It's basically a home game, like you said. And I think Ohio State's going to have a letdown at some point. And they did beat Oregon, but it was easy to get up for Oregon because it was revenge. They did beat Tennessee. That's because they were coming off that Michigan loss, so they were pissed, right? So that's fine. And but when they lost to Oregon the first time, they played Nebraska in the next game, and they almost lost that game. It was 21-17.
Should have lost that game.
Yep. So they got lucky. Now, how do you get up for Texas? Oh, guys, this is mighty Texas. Everybody's looking at you. You're now if they reseeded, Ohio State would be number one. Because the way they won their games. And now you're the favorite. There's no doubt about it. They're the biggest favorite coming into this weekend. Now Texas gets to be like, now we get to be the dog. And no one cares about the seeding at this point. At the end of the day, everybody knows, the whole world knows, Ohio State is 6 points as a favorite over Texas. And Texas knows that. And Sarkisian will use that. Matthew McConaughey will use that. They'll do this. Texas has a real shot at winning a title. Because if they use the psyche correctly as the dog price, and remember, I'm still impressed with Texas's big win against Arizona State. On the final play of the game, you score a touchdown. What moxie? Jesus Christ, what moxie is that? They're the ones that are really battle tested, and they're battle tested against Clemson too. They might not play a full set of minutes, but when it counts, they play in crunch time. And I don't think Ohio State's tested like that. I like Texas solidly.
If their offense can stop fading in the second half after halftime, the one thing I do like about Texas is they've got, out of all the teams in college football, Ohio State's clearly cut above the rest as far as their roster with their nil money and all that kind of stuff. Texas is as close as it gets to Ohio State's roster as far as elite talent. And they haven't, with Oregon, you got that talent on offense, maybe not so much on defense. With Texas, it's all over the field, just like the Buckeyes. So they just got to quit with that second half fade. If they can do that, they could potentially win this football game. I like the reasoning, like you said, also Ohio State's gone from hunter to hunted. And I think that makes a difference in these kind of games also. Saturday NFL, Chargers laying 2.5, total 42.5 at Houston. And I'm not a big Eagles guy, I see. We've talked about it before when it comes to regular season pro football. But I do kind of tend to look at them in the postseason because they tend to work well and for many years. And there are a couple of nice angles involved in this game. One of those, for what it's worth, happens to be wild card home dogs. They do well. 20 wins, 9 defeats, 1 push the last 30 times. And I look at 5 of Houston's last 7 losses. They came by 1 score. They lost to Baltimore, the Chiefs, the Lions, the Packers. 3 of those were a 1-score loss. So it's not like they're getting blown out by teams they should beat. They played elite level teams and they played them close. You can tell where I'm leaning here. I like Houston over the Chargers. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the best bet for me is probably the under. I'm going to stay away from the side. Houston's been super flaky, but I can totally see them showing up at home and winning. And the Chargers do make sense with some huge wins lately. But I don't know. Houston's a very difficult place to play. Keep in mind that, but at the end of the day, the Chargers, the line is only -3. But what else are you going to put the Chargers? Of course, you're going to put them as a 3-point favorite on the road against Houston. You can't really put them as a 4.5-point favorite because that seems kind of rude to Houston, who's 10-7. But the Chargers at the end of the day did beat Denver, but they got throttled by Tampa Bay, who's sort of like a Houston-esque team. So maybe that's the reason why. But they beat my Falcons, they beat the Bengals, and so on. So I like the under more than anything else. I don't think the Chargers, after scoring 34, 40, and 34, they light up Houston. I think Houston, you have Coach Ryans, who's an Alabama product. They're going to play really quality defense. That's one thing that they've done all year long. If you look at it, they've only given up more than 30 points twice. The Ravens game, which was an ugly game. But I like the under. I think that's the only way that Houston hangs tough. And if that line is a +3, it's kind of an indirect lean on Houston, and I like the under.
Next up, we got the Steelers at Baltimore. And, we've seen Mike Tomlin. He's just really had Lamar Jackson's number over the years. This year, they've split with Lamar in Baltimore and, won the first game 18-16, kicking a bunch of field goals. Lost the second game 34-17, a little bit misleading in that final score. It was 24-17 before things got a little bit haywire in that contest. And I think it was a pick 6 involved. But I looked at Baltimore in the 2 games again this year. Lamar, 55% passer against Pittsburgh. They get in his head. They know how to defend him. And if you look at his playoffs, in his career, 2-4 and a quarterback rating around 75. I like Lamar off the field as much as I like him on the field. He owns this. He blames himself. What are your thoughts? Does he finally break through? And if he does, he's got to cover that big number. Basically, at 10, you're asking Baltimore to win by 14 points.
I hate this game for Baltimore, and it's not like I'm a huge Baltimore fan. I'm a huge Lamar Jackson fan, like you. I think he's just a good person. I'm a huge Falcons fan, but I hate this setup for them because you have a setup where you have a Pittsburgh team that you just beat them 34-17. It's going to be easier for Tomlin to coach them up after losing 4 in a row. I hate this for Baltimore. What I will tell you is that Baltimore, their window is getting smaller, and we'll talk about Josh Allen and his window soon. But Baltimore does come in winning 4 in a row. I like the under. I just think the familiarity is too much between these 2 teams. They faced each other twice in the last 2 months. They know each other so inside and out. The last one, like you said, was a pick 6. That's probably not going to happen. Wouldn't be surprised at all to see this game go under the posted total.
Next up, Denver. This is the Sunday games, of course. Denver at Buffalo. The Bills laying 9, total 47. Going to be cold, but the weather's not going to be too bad. I don't see any forecast of heavy snow or rain in this one, and both teams are used to playing in the cold weather. I'm not sure if I mentioned this earlier or not, but wild card favorites of 9 or more are on a 15-1 straight up run. They've covered 13 of those last 16. And then to go along with that, you got Denver starting a rookie quarterback on the road, and they do not do well in the postseason. In the wild card round, they've lost 5 in a row and only covered 1 of those. So it's a tough spot for Bo Nix. And he doesn't have the kind of targets or arsenal around him as does Josh Allen, I see. And, for that reason and for those reasons mentioned with those angles and everything else, as much as I like what Nix has done this year, I don't think he can keep up with Josh and that offense with the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, I like the Bills. And I'm a huge Josh Allen fan, and I think their window is getting close. I think Josh Allen's like 28 or 29 years old, so he's getting up there too. You're gonna have a quarterback that's aging, so to speak, and you won't have Josh. You will still have Josh Allen for many years to come, but not like the MVP Josh Allen,
right?
Like the guy who ran over the Detroit Lions. You won't have that guy as much anymore. So their window is closing. They've had some painful losses over the years. The Broncos are very sketchy as a squad. Yes, they won some games. Yes, they beat the Chiefs, but that's also because the Chiefs didn't play anybody. Yes, remember, they lost to the Bengals by 6. They lost to the Chargers by 7, and the Chargers are flaky. And I think the Broncos, but of course, the Broncos have a phenomenal coach. There's no doubt. But I like the fact the Bills lost to them 2 years ago, or last year rather. And I like the fact that the Bills lost their last game to the Patriots, even though it didn't matter. It just leaves a bad taste in your mouth just to be pissed at somebody or something. And I think the Bills understand, how important, obviously, it is to not take anything for granted because their windows are closing. They also added a lot of depth this year, the Bills did, right?
Sure.
Added a ton of depth, and I like the Bills.
And one of the reasons I kind of like these big favorites in the wild card round is it's now the postseason. So they're not going to be up 21 midway through the 4th and start getting conservative. They're going to look to throw the football and do whatever got them that 21-point lead. There's no, okay, we're going to get it backdoored here because all of a sudden the other team is just sitting there doing nothing. Like you see in the regular season when a team gets a big lead midway through the 4th. Packers at Philadelphia, the Eagles laying 4.5, 45.5. I'm going to let you have at it here because I really want to see the reports on Jalen Hurts, who had the concussion. We did see that he practiced on Wednesday morning. We're doing this on Wednesday evening, but I really got to dive in on Thursday and see all the reports as to how he looked in practice. And did he compete in a full practice, or was he just out there throwing the ball around a little bit? So I'll leave this up to you if you got to play on this one. I can't make a call until I figure out if Hurts is kind of close to healthy or not.
Yeah, I mean, the Packers have been really disappointing this year, losing to the Bears, losing to the Vikings, losing to the Lions, which isn't that disappointing. But the fact they've lost back-to-back games coming in, you would have expected a little bit more from them. Philadelphia, the teams that's won 9 of 10, covered 7 of 9. I mean, that's pretty impressive. Whenever you think they're not going to do well, they ended up doing well. But they did lose to Washington. I have an eerie feeling that the Packers could win this game. An eerie feeling where they
got the better coach, I see, by far. Got the better coach by far, I think. LaFleur over Sirianni, and the players respect LaFleur.
That's true, and it's just an eerie feeling because you get Green Bay coming in pissed, coming off back-to-back losses, and they did only lose to the Lions by 3 points on the road. They did beat Seattle 30-13 on the road, and that Minnesota loss by 2 isn't that bad considering that they put up 15 points in the fourth quarter and did make a comeback. And that Bears loss was just maybe they didn't take the Bears seriously. That was the Bears Super Bowl, if you will. I think I sort of like the Packers plus the points, and I'm not even messing with the totals. I sort of like the Packers.
Talking me into it a little bit there, no matter how well Hurts practiced on Wednesday when I find out about him on Thursday. Commanders at Tampa Bay wraps up the Sunday football games. Tampa Bay laying a field goal, total 50.5 in this one. Listen, we all like Jalen Daniels. There might be a sophomore slump next season, but I still think he's going to have a strong NFL career and going to be around for a while. I'm just not crazy about this spot. Tampa's so freaking dangerous, and they're healthy for the most part. I don't put much into that week 1, 37-20 Tampa win over Washington because, that was Daniel's first game of his NFL career. But again, rookie quarterbacks on the road don't fare well when it comes to playoff action, and Washington wants and needs to run. Problem is for Washington, Tampa Bay's defense has been great against the run. In fact, over the last 5 weeks or so, they've been at the top of the league on defense. And now they get Antoine Winfield back also in the secondary. I look for reasons to back them here when you talk about the Commanders, but I can't do it.
Yeah, I'm going to back Washington. I think they got a little revenge coming in. I think that this is definitely a benchmark game for Daniels. I think that Washington played probably a tougher schedule than Tampa Bay, and I'm an Atlanta Falcons fan. And I think Washington really played probably a bit of they played the Chiefs at one point. They lost to Atlanta as well. They lost early. I'm sorry. They played, I should say, the Bears, the Giants, etc. But they lost to the Steelers by 1. They lost to the Eagles, but then they got their revenge against the Eagles, beating them by 3. They beat my Falcons in a sort of a lucky game, etc. But Tampa Bay is very, very good at home. And they're a very tough team to beat at home. They throttled the Chargers on the road. They lost to Dallas in a game that they probably should have won. They just destroyed Carolina. They beat New Orleans in a shaky, shaky game. But I hate the fact that Washington has that revenge coming in. That game was 37-20. There was 57 points scored in that game. I think that this game probably goes under just because I think that what you will see is Washington not giving up 37 points like they did last time. Especially with the coach that is defensive minded, like the Washington Brass is. And also, I think Tampa Bay, will play a little bit better defense, at home where they're giving up 19, 14, 13 points of lately at home. So I have a small lean on the under. I want to take Washington as well, but I just can't do it. I just can't do it, even though they have revenge. But I would lean on the under first and a smaller lean on Washington. But I definitely don't like this game as much as, let's say, maybe Green Bay or a Buffalo or, a Ravens under and so on. So
I would think I would hope by Thursday afternoon, things die down a little bit as far as the tragedy going on right now in the LA area with the fire just going nuts, and winds are supposed to be 100 miles per hour overnight, Wednesday night into Thursday, as high as 100 miles per hour. Hopefully the winds will die down, they get under control. But just a note for everybody watching, as of Wednesday evening, as we cut this video, they've already said if they have to move this game out of SoFi, it'll be played in Arizona, home of the Cardinals. So just keep that in mind. And also some prayers out there, man. I've already had 2 friends who lost homes, one in Malibu, one in Palisades. Got another buddy in Brentwood who hasn't been affected yet, but they had to evacuate Brentwood. And a lot of people probably know Nick Mackay. He's a friend of mine. I spent whole Sunday a few years ago over at his house in Hollywood Hills with his wife watching Sunday NFL. He's, of course, the producer of like 2.5 Men, King of Queens, the bookie on HBO right now, HBO Max. And I just saw before we started doing this video that the flames have started up in Hollywood Hills. And that's nothing but shrubs, trees. So hopefully, we'll keep the prayers going and we can get this squelched pretty fast. Having said all of that, back to the football game. Vikings pick or 1-point favorite as we speak. About half the books have it pick them. That total 48. And again, with it in mind that the game may be moved to Phoenix, Arizona, I see.
Yeah, I mean, this is actually a difficult game for a variety of reasons. For starters, you have and the most important person in this series might be Dan Campbell from what he said. When Dan Campbell shook hands with O'Donnell, he said, "I'll see you in 2 weeks," or something like that, right? And all the Rams fans got offended. They said, "Well, you got to get past us first," which makes me think he probably did it on purpose because he doesn't want to face the Vikings again with revenge. He probably wanted to face the Rams, and that's the reason why he probably said it. He knew exactly what he was saying, just to give the Rams a little motivation, probably. I'm sure that was really calculated. The Rams did beat this team 30-20 last time. They beat this team last 3 times. They probably have the better coach in McVay, who has won a Super Bowl. Minnesota comes off of a bad loss, but Minnesota probably wasn't as focused because they were heading into this game. Because, I just don't see them as focused for whatever reason against Detroit. But, the Rams come off a loss to Seattle, but they're also well rested. So, this is a difficult game. The last time this game went to 50 points, over 46.5. This time it's slated at 48. I would either lean for the under or I would lean on Minnesota, actually, because Minnesota does have revenge. The Rams, but at the same time, what are you going to do? Are you really going to go against a Rams team that beat the Bills, or you're going to go against McVay? But then again, Minnesota had that massive winning streak, but who did Minnesota beat in that winning streak, right? Green Bay, okay, fine. Seattle on the road, sketchy. Chicago, Atlanta, Arizona, Chicago, Tennessee, Jacksonville, Indianapolis. So I think you either have to maybe lean on the Rams minus the 1, or plus the 1, which could be minus the 1 by game time. And now they're going to be kumbaya playing for the city of Los Angeles, which works against Minnesota. So I think you either got to go Rams or you got to go under, but probably Rams the more I think about it.
I can't back the Vikings for a couple of, you already mentioned who they beaten, right? I mean, Minnesota. If you take Green Bay off the schedule and they played them and they beat them twice, they seem to have Jordan Love and the Packers figured out this season. But if you take Green Bay, those 2 games out of the mix, then Minnesota's 1-3 against teams that have played, playoff football. And that's what they are right now. Playoff teams, 4 other than Green Bay, have gone 3-1 against Minnesota. And in those 4 games, the Vikings defense has allowed over 270 passing yards per game, 8 yards per attempt. How about a 75% completion rate, 8 touchdowns? 75% I see of 136 passes have found their mark. The quarterbacks made the pass, the receivers made the reception in those games against Minnesota. We know what the Rams, did against the Vikings earlier this season. They beat them by 10. Stafford was one of those playoff quarterbacks who chewed up Minnesota's secondary. 270 through the air, 4 touchdowns, only 1 pick. I think that's worrisome if you're Minnesota. So to me, if you're going to play a side here, there's one way to go, and that would be the LA Rams on a Monday. Any final thoughts before we call it a week?
No, man. It's prayers, right, for the people in LA. It seems to be getting worse and worse, and hopefully the folks there can kind of get it underneath control. But that's about it. It's kind of a somber note, but we have a lot of football ahead, and it should be interesting. And then there were 4, and then there will be 2. And maybe this is the Big Ten's revenge on the SEC for all those years that they put LSU, Alabama. It totally makes sense. So the Big Ten's like, as soon as they get a Big Ten commissioner in there, 2 Big Ten teams end up in there. When Sankey was there, it was 2 SEC teams that ended up in there. So, yeah.
All right, man. Well, listen, our plays will be available on Thursday afternoon over at DocSports.com for the upcoming football weekend. And be sure to check out the daily sports each and every day of the week. I see myself, everybody else over at Doc Sports. We'll be back here next week, Wednesday night, Thursday morning, throughout the weekend, as we talk about the next round of the NFL playoffs and, of course, the championship game in college football. He's IC. I'm Scott. We're DocSports.com. Let's put him in the win column, everybody.